Today I'm replacing the belt in a 2006 to 2007 LBZ Duramax Chevrolet Truck. This should also relatively apply to other years and engine models as well. Unfortunately, this job is not quite as easy as you'd expect, and that's because there's a lot of fan shrouding that's in your way that keeps you from being able to get your tools in there to get the tensioner released. If you haven't already done this yet, you're going to want to go ahead and make a diagram of your belt routing so that you know how it goes back on. My truck doesn't have any stickers or anything on it that shows it. Here's the diagram that I made. If you just want to use mine, it's a little bit messy, but it'll work. First thing you need to do is loosen this one hose clamp on your air box. The air box will then pull from the vehicle. That's right, there's nothing holding it in except that one clamp. At this point, there have been some other videos on the internet showing people reaching in right behind here with a really thin tool, being able to release the tension. I've not had any luck with that. I don't have that type of belt tension tool, and so I'm end up making a little more room, that way I can fit my breaker bar in there. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is loosen this fan shroud so that I have room to get my tools in. There's a bolt at the very top center. I'm going to remove that bolt, and then if you follow this fan shroud straight around toward the passenger side of the vehicle, way down there, it's hard to see on the camera, I don't think you can see it, but there is actually another bolt, 13 millimeter. With that one, I'm going to loosen it, basically loosen it up about as far as it'll go, but I'm not actually going to remove it, because if you remove it, it's kind of difficult to get rethreaded to put back in. To access this, I'm just using a short ratchet with a regular 13 millimeter socket on it, and I'm going to reach it in down through here. It's a little difficult to do, but once I get it on there, there's just barely enough room for me to be able to turn and loosen that bolt. Alright, with those removed, I'm now able to push this back, and you can see the tensioner right there. That allows me to push this back and get my tools accessed into there. In the center of the belt tensioner is a 1/2 inch fitting that will accept the end of a breaker bar or a 1/2 inch ratchet or something like that. I prefer a breaker bar just because it gives me a little more leverage. But what I'm going to do is reach this down in there and push this back, and then get this fitted in that fitting. I had to sit down the camera to do it and use both hands, but there you can see the breaker bar is inserted in there. Next thing, all I'm going to have to do is pull this breaker bar to the left, and while doing that, let my belt off that alternator pulley right there with my other hand. And then it's off. Alright, I actually just leave the breaker bar on there. It doesn't really get in the way too bad, just a little bit when you're putting it back on, but it's just easier to leave it there. To access the bottom of the belt where it wraps around the crank, there's a plastic skid plate that will be in the front of your truck that you'll need to remove. This is the same skid plate, although it's modified on my truck because of my lift. But there should be 3 bolts across the top, and I forget, but there might be a couple more bolts back farther on your truck. But remove that, and then you'll be able to reach up and pull the belt out. Alright, from down here, I'm just gonna reach up. Pull this kind of forward, get it wedged in there as best I can in front of this fan shroud. So I'm gonna hope to try to pull it out the top. Okay, now that I have the belt off, I'm gonna start kind of feeding this through, getting it off of things. It's hard to pull out, very tight, but it's coming. And there it is. Got the belt off, get a new one, and start from there. What I start off by doing is getting under the truck and feeding this belt on and feeding this belt on from the bottom around that crank. That way, as I pull it up, it'll go ahead and be around that crank pulley. Once I've got that fed up through the bottom, then I'm going to go around to the top of the engine. So I'm going to pull it up through this gap right here. Okay, and so now I've got it. The next place this goes is, this truck's kind of got a weird tensioner. I don't know if you noticed when you're pulling it off, but this belt fed through the tensioner backwards, like it's reverse. So the next place I'll take this is on over there and try to get it hooked on the tensioner. What I do to get it on that, to get it over that tensioner, is actually reach down there with a hook of some sort and pull. So I don't know if you can see it, the belt there is, I've got it right up there kind of next to the tensioner as best I can, fed behind it. It's difficult to get over it, so I'm going to reach in with this hook and kind of pull it up through this gap right there. Alright, I got it hooked, and so now I'm just pulling it up and over. So next I'm going to feed it around the fan pulley. That way I can get it over toward the power steering. Then I got it just routed over there. So I just put it around power steering pump. And the next place it goes is up and over the AC. Alright. Now I'm going to go back to the other side, go from the tensioner around that bottom idler. Got it around the other idler down there, and then I temporarily wrapped it around the alternator. The alternator is going to be the last thing that I hook up, just like it was the thing that I took it off of. I'm going to feed it around this last idler and then kind of get underneath the truck, make sure it looks like it's lined up on all the pulleys, and then I'll be ready to feed it onto the alternator for good. Okay, once you've made sure that you got the belt lined up and that it's where it needs to be everywhere, then you'll be ready to take the tension off and wrap it over the alternator pulley. Alright, got it on. Now all we have to do is remove the breaker bar and put these bolts back in the fan shroud. Make sure that the fan shroud hasn't moved in any way, that this fan still turns freely inside the shroud, and then put the airbox back in. And start your vehicle, make sure that there's no weird noises, make sure that the belt looks like it's running smoothly, and you can call this job done.